Welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Hillsborough and to our virtual service, which is available on both Facebook and YouTube. Before we begin, I want to thank the people who helped put this service together. Thank you, Aviva Enoch and David Yelton, for helping organize this service and providing music. Thank you, Wendy Calvin, for handling the overall technology. And thank you, Reverend Holly Lux Sullivan, for agreeing to serve as our guest minister today. We have recently had an election that I think has turned out well and lifted a weight from us. So we're happy about that. We do a sharing of the plate, and this month we are sharing with Orange County Justice United. We can now light the chalice. We light this chalice to remember the light within, to know that the hunger we feel inside is not an emptiness, but the echo of an inner wisdom that already knows what we need.
The words to our call to worship are written by Reverend Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy and your passion. Bring your loving and your courage and your conviction. Bring your need for healing and your powers to heal. There is work to do, and you have all that you need to do it right here in this room. Holy One, our hearts are wearied, are tired, are breaking. Our hearts are stretching as they are pulled and pushed, bruised and battered by all the suffering and brokenness and pain. Our ears are ringing ringing with harsh words, with yelling, with gunfire that echoes in our streets and takes lives of innocents without cause. They're ringing with the affirmation that Black Lives Matter again and again until this idea is manifested in our legislation, our communities, and our hearts. We have heard stories of equality and justice, but our eyes burn from the instances of inequality, racism, and injustice that illustrate we are still far from where we hope to be. Our mouths speak words of hope, of courage, and of truth, and at times we find that words do no justice. The brokenness feels too big. Our bodies, our collective bodies, built for lifting one another up and built for holding each other in love, they're being used against one another as weapons, and the ammunition is hatred and fear. Spirit of life and love, in this time of dissonance, in this time of holy urgency, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Help us to find our voice. Help us to see beyond this brokenness to a time of healing and true community. Help us remember that the only journey toward is one that is paved through humility, acceptance of responsibility, and counteracting complacency. But one taken together, bolstered by deep listening and deeply rooted in love. May we find the strength needed for the journey here, in this place, and in all places where people gather for love, for humanity, and for justice.
This is the time to express joys, sorrows, and milestones. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a sharing community where our joys are celebrated, and a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. Each Sunday, we take a moment to share and reflect on the special happenings that have occurred this week in our lives. For those of you who would like to share in the comments or the chat, please do so, and know that everything shared aloud and in silence is held dearly in the heart. We will hold these things gently in our hearts. Poet Elizabeth Alexander writes, "When I was younger, I used to think that love as an ethic was obviously a good thing, but a little corny. I am certainly an optimist, but not a fool. In academic environments, we are taught a skepticism that can lead us to discount the power and force of love. In academic environments, we are taught, but the older I get, the more I think of all the possible permutations and possibilities of a love ethic. To love someone or something is not just to agree with them or affirm them. To bother to engage with problematic culture and problematic people within that culture is an act of love. So what does it mean in a complex and dead serious way to come from that place of love.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
In my years as a hospice chaplain, I've accompanied many people facing their mortality. Many, as we cope with a life-ending illness, struggle with the perfectly understandable desire to be healed. Many believe that if they pray for healing, God will cure their illness. I am told miracles happen. Diseases mysteriously disappear. A cancer or other infirmity that is there on one scan is gone on the next. I've never known one of the people for whom that's true, but those cases are well documented. What is less well documented than those rare miracles is how very many people pray for an illness to go away who have to accept when it doesn't, that they will and do die. In these all too common cases, my job is to help the person consider the possibility of healing as being broader than a cure. Healing might mean accepting the inevitability of death, or making peace with family members, or making peace with not making peace with family members. Healing can take a million forms depending on the person going through this final stage of life. The spiritual and emotional journey from thinking of healing as a cure to thinking of healing in others' ways plays out in my work as a bereavement counselor as well. We want to get over our grief after a loved one's death, to get back to normal. Healing begins, though, when we acknowledge there is no getting over it. There's only moving through the pain, sorrow, fatigue, and heartbreak. There is no getting back to normal, only rebuilding life without the person we love, rebuilding life around the hole that their absence leaves. In grief, there is no cure. There is only healing. Accepting that there is no cure and considering what healing might be is what we as an American society now must face and have only just begun to accept. No matter who is in the White House or has greater numbers in the House or the Senate, our country suffers from a life-limiting illness. Our democracy cannot survive 250 more years of oppressing millions of people of color or the denial of that oppression by so many. It was August 2017 when a Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia turned deadly as white supremacists attacked people peacefully protesting at a Robert E. Lee statue. One woman was killed and 19 others were injured. 2 Virginia State Police troopers died when their helicopter crashed. That rally was 3 long years ago. I remember the shock I felt at seeing neo-Nazis unabashedly marching and screaming hate at people holding a candlelight vigil, singing songs of peace. How naive I was to be shocked by it. How naive, frankly, many white people were. I wasn't someone who thought the election of President Obama meant that we lived in a magically post-racial America, as if one man's political success undid 400 years of systemic racism and oppression. But I did think that we were at a point in our country when mass displays of unbridled hate were unthinkable. The people of color in my life were, to say the least, less surprised by those shows of hate. Now, as 2020 nears its end, such public outspoken hatred is alarmingly commonplace. In my own Alamance County, the end of September saw a caravan of people drive from Elon to the Confederate monument in Graham in support of the president. They shouted horrific racist things and carried signs saying "Crack Lives Matter." I was repulsed by the hate I saw, even as I thought, I've probably helped take care of their mothers or grandfathers. I've probably been in at least one of those people's homes and prayed with them. This cognitive dissonance isn't new for me. Several years ago, I was at a visit with one of the hospice nurses, and as she talked with our white patient, the patient's husband, who was also white, started to talk to me about a commentator on TV who was African American. The racist things he said aren't worth repeating, but at the time they stunned me into utter speechlessness. So I was proud when I finally had the presence of mind to say to this Christian man, "Are we not all children of God?" I was even more stunned when he said, "I'm beginning to think not." At that point, all I could do was reply that I wasn't the right person to have this conversation with, and turn my attention back to his wife, my patient. If invoking this man's Christian God wasn't enough to make him reconsider what he was saying, nothing, I might suggest, was. But this moment stuck with me because of the parable of the Good Samaritan, in which a Jewish traveler is robbed, beaten, and left for dead. 2 Jews, a priest and a layperson, pass him by at the side of the road. When Jesus tells the story, he makes a point of saying that both of those people saw the injured man. Yet it is the Samaritan who stops, cleans and dresses the man's wounds, then puts the man on his own donkey and takes him to an inn, paying for the innkeeper to care for him. Samaritans were the enemy, despised by the Jews. And to be fair, the Samaritans hated the Jews right back. But two Jews, theoretically the man's own people, passed by him. Only a hated Samaritan had the compassion, the humanity to provide assistance. That's among the many lessons Jesus taught his followers, not to pass by someone who is injured and broken, but to love them, whatever their nationality or ethnicity. In that moment in the story, the Samaritan didn't see Jew or Samaritan. He saw someone wounded. Most of us would like to think if we saw someone broken and bleeding in the road, we'd stop and help, or at least call 911. And I'm sure we would. Yet how many times have I passed someone experiencing homelessness on the street and looked straight ahead rather than meet their eyes? Isn't it similar? Who and what is behind the bitter hatred and callousness of those people shouting racist and misogynistic slogans? Might not those people be broken too in ways less obvious than if they'd been robbed, beaten, and left for dead? Might they not have been robbed, beaten, and left for dead metaphorically? What's fascinating is how differently we experience someone one-on-one than when they're in a group. Those folks I saw at the rally screaming and yelling hatred are absolutely the same people who would welcome me with open arms into their home as their chaplain and ask me to pray for and with them. It's the individual we can touch, not the mob whipped into a frenzy. When we are able to remain calm in body and mind, we know intellectually that behind almost all anger and hatred lie fear and pain and want. Chaplaincy for me is about helping people find the strength within themselves to begin to heal from the wounds life has dealt them, loving them into believing that kind of healing is possible. Recently, Episcopalian Bishop Michael Curry spoke on a podcast with social scientist Brene Brown about the power of love to ignite change. Bishop Curry said this: "The civil rights movement at its best and strongest was motivated by love. It was a fight for justice and equality that was not a fight to destroy, but a fight to build up. It was a fight to create a new world. You are struggling against something, but not against people. You're struggling against systems and ways of being and ways of living and organizing a society that are putting some down. And the people who think they're benefiting from it, they're being put down at the same time," he says. So you don't struggle against the people. You struggle against the system, the issue, whatever it happens to be. You seek to convert the people. You seek to transform, not only oppressed, but oppressor as well, because that's the only way we're all going to get free, to believe that in the end, love wins. For me, despite voter suppression and politicians seemingly incapable of human connection across party lines, I still believe love can and does win. It's only in bringing down oppressive structures and loving people in the process that we will come through this hellish year of pandemic, ugliness, and civic uprising stronger than we've been. As Bishop Curry says, we fight not against the people, but against the system, and we work to transform the people along the way, ourselves included. The how of transforming people lies, at least in part, with our artists and their art. Greensboro native Rhiannon Giddens has created a career built on reclaiming the African-American roots of bluegrass and folk music, banjo music in particular. She's an amazing talent whose music and curiosity for the world are unparalleled. In a recent interview, Giddens said this about the moment in which we find ourselves as a country and a world in crisis. "There is a chance of a great spiritual awakening if we can find the path of kindness and inclusion. It's very easy to go down the other path of fear and exclusion. That's where art comes in. We need to lead the way down that path however we can." As progressive Americans revel in Joe Biden's declared win, we must take her advice to heart. We must focus on the path of kindness and inclusion. Let us focus on how art might help reconnect us with each other. Let us remember that almost half the voters in our country voted for someone else, yet we remain neighbors, coworkers, families. I offer up a few causes for celebration, even as we recognize there's no overnight cure for our nation's ills. First, most importantly, more Americans voted in this election than in any previous one. Red or blue, Republican or Democrat, Americans voted. Our national apathy around our elected leadership has, for now at least, waned. Second, Kamala Harris will be our first female vice president. She is the daughter of immigrants from India and Jamaica, so she will also be the first. So she'll be the first woman, the first Black person, the first Indian American, and the first Asian American to hold the office. Third, the 4 young women of color elected in 2018, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, all won re-election to the House of Representatives. 4, New York voters elected 2 gay Black men to Congress, Richie Torres and Mondaire Jones. It's worth noting that Torres identifies as both Black and Latino, thus becoming the first openly gay Latinx member of Congress. 5, in Delaware, Sarah McBride was elected as the country's first trans senator. 6, in Oklahoma, Mauree Turner, a queer Black Muslim who identifies as non-binary, was elected to the state legislature. This victory comes just a year after that same state's legislature refused to let an imam say its daily prayer for the chamber. And this year, a queer Black Muslim who is non-binary is elected to the legislature. That's amazing. Turner said this about running for the seat. This was about drawing space, not fighting for a seat at the table, but creating a new table altogether. This, I think, creating a new table is where art comes in. Not only reforming our existing institutions, but creating new ones, welcoming in crazy ideas that might actually work. We imagine a world that doesn't yet exist to help nudge it into existence. One of my favorite recent examples of this is the TV show Schitt's Creek, about a ridiculously wealthy family that loses everything and has to live in the small town the father once bought his son as a joke. He bought a town. Over the show's 6 seasons, the Rose family painfully, gradually, and with a lot of missteps, grow into better versions of themselves. As they struggle, one aspect of life that is never at issue is son David's sexuality. As he puts it, he drinks red wine, but he also drinks white wine. He likes the wine, not the label. In Schitt's Creek, being pansexual is not a thing to be debated. It just is. David's pansexuality is accepted as part of him, just as his sister's heterosexuality is. And when David's boyfriend, Patrick, finally comes out to his parents, Patrick's parents are upset not because he's gay, but because he thought they might have a problem with it. This show offers us new ways of looking at things. The Roses begin as a hopelessly snotty, privileged bunch of jerks and end as less snotty, more loving people who have accidentally become a real family because they've been stuck living together in a motel for several years. They are redeemable, as are we all. And in Schitt's Creek, homophobia just doesn't exist. It's hinted at in Patrick's concern about coming out to his parents, but his anxiety is misplaced. In Schitt's Creek, people are loved for who they are as full, complex humans. It's worth noting, too, that in that town, there are no political parties. Even when 2 characters are battling it out for a seat on town council, Democrat and Republican are never mentioned. Everyone is an individual. Just like in that fictional TV town, We are all beautiful, flawed people, people in need of forgiveness as well as needing to forgive others. We all need to heal. The seeming bifurcation of our country didn't happen overnight in 2016 any more than it was resolved overnight by the 2020 election. Excuse me. Wounds this deep need time and gentle tending to heal. It's only in fantasy novels and movies that a wound instantaneously seals back up if the right tincture is applied. In reality, bandages stick and tear off the scab. Wounds reopen. You clean and dress it again and start over. Maybe, just maybe, this year has made us recognize how infected our country's wounds are. So we continue to work because for too long, the onus of fixing oppression has been on our country's people of color. For too long, white people have said, well, I didn't own slaves. I didn't do this. I can't fix it. But we can. We have to, because no cure is coming. The political divide is real and almost evenly split, but that doesn't mean either side is irredeemable. It means we have a lot of work to do to connect with people who happen to vote differently than we do. Humans are short-sighted animals, often believing, because it feels that the moment in which we find ourselves is the moment, that defining moment when all will be lost or won. People, I think, have believed this throughout history. In the early days of the Second World War, on January 1st, 1941, John Steinbeck wrote, "Our species has learned nothing, can, as a race, learn nothing. Not that I have lost any hope. All the goodness and the heroisms will rise up again, then be cut down again and rise up. It isn't that the evil thing wins, it never will, but that it doesn't die. Neither does our human will to work for what we believe in die. Our belief that things can and should be better doesn't die. Frankly, our unreasonable stubbornness doesn't die. It's that stubbornness that drives people to allow injustice to continue, but it's that same stubbornness that keeps others fighting against it too." In the 19th century, Unitarian minister and abolitionist Theodore Parker preached these words, later made more concise and famous by Martin Luther King Jr. Parker said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." The moral arc bends towards justice. I believe that too. Humanity as a whole is progressing. Yes, we will double back on ourselves and stumble in this journey, but we as a culture are moving toward greater equity. We have an extremely long way to go, and we cannot stop fighting, but we continue to inch along. At the end of the day, after the runoff elections, after all the votes have been counted and certified, what every one of us wants is more or less the same: love, safety, nourishment, to feel that we matter. How we experience those things, the ways in which we find those things differs for each of us. But when we focus on those bedrock needs and desires, we can lay aside our desperate search for a cure that doesn't exist. There is no cure, but there can be healing. Let us tend the world's wounds together and trust that healing will follow when love and justice are the salve we use consistently, I dare say religiously, every day we live. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
We will now extinguish our chalice.
1 minute, please.
We will now extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the spark of joy in our worship, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. Blessed be, my friends, until we meet again.